So, you've jumped behind the screen and started running games of D&D. Now what? Just like with any hobby, being a dungeon master is a skill, one that can be practiced and improved. But unlike with playing a sport or learning an instrument, it can be harder to think of how exactly you can get better at running the game, besides running more sessions, of course. In this video, I want to give you tips for improving that have helped me become a better dungeon master. Results guaranteed. Probably. Without further ado, let's get started. I learned how to play D&D from actual plays. First the Adventure Zone, then Critical Role. Before I ever rolled a D20, I'd consumed a lot of D&D and seen several different dungeon masters running the game. A lot of DMs start out as players before getting behind the screen, meaning they've already seen others do it before attempting to lead things themselves. Even as a veteran DM, you can learn a lot from watching others run the game. Whether you're binging Dimension 20 or letting one of your friends take a turn in the DM chair, D&D is a collaborative process, and seeing how others handle situations can help you better understand how you want to run things. Beyond just emulating them though, analyzing what you like or don't like about their DMing style will help you hone your own. For example, I realized that one thing I really like about Matt Mercer's style is his descriptions, the way he pulls players into a scene, making the place they're in as much of a character as the NPCs. So I started trying to improve my own narrations when the players arrive in a new town or are exploring a dense forest. Really thinking through what you like or don't like will help you add to your game while still retaining your own sense of style and fun. One last note, don't fall into the trap of comparison. It's easy to see others doing well running their game and start questioning your own. It's a trap I still fall into sometimes. There's room in this world for many great DMs, and just like you can learn from others, they can learn from you too. So be confident when analyzing how others run the game, because if you're trying to improve and grow, chances are you're already doing great. I over-prep. I said it, it's true, I have a problem. When I run the game, I like to have a very solid foundation to work from. I feel most comfortable behind the screen when I have a good idea of where my players are going, what's out there for them to find, and how they might react to those discoveries. But learning to pull back on the prep a little bit and trust my abilities to improvise was something that took practice. And one-shots were the perfect testing ground to try things out. By nature, one-shots are lower stakes than a full-blown campaign. You're playing this adventure once, so if things go terribly wrong, you just move on to the next one. This makes one-shots great for trying out new skills or testing your limits when running the game, because if you fail and accidentally TPK the party, well, you're not throwing away a whole campaign. Running one-shots with minimal prep really helped boost my confidence that I didn't always need detailed notes to run a good session. It helped me hone in on which aspects I have to focus on while prepping and which I could be a little less thorough on. Sure, I probably still prep more than your average DM, but I do so with the confidence that if things go way off the rails, I can adapt. Whether you're trying to mix up how you run combat, try out some new homebrew rules, or just get better at the management aspect of the game, using one-shots as your personal DM laboratories is an easy, stress-free way to see what works and what's best left out of your games. A lot of what makes running D&D difficult is that as a dungeon master, you need to be both a game designer and a storyteller. It's true that your players will help shape both the direction of the story and what form the gameplay takes, but as the DM, you're the one creating the framework that everything hangs on. While this can be challenging, the good news is that there are literally thousands of examples to pull from, if you're willing to play, or read, or watch. You can learn a lot about being a dungeon master from the media you consume. Take video games, for example. Looking at how a game sets up its quest lines can give you an idea for how to craft your own adventures, especially RPGs. When I first started out, watching videos on the stories of Skyrim was a big help in seeing how I could progress players along a quest. Interacting with NPCs and playing games where player choice really matters will also help you roleplay and set up interesting scenarios for your players to navigate. How about books? As a dungeon master, giving vivid descriptions of the world and characters is a big part of the job, and that's literally all books are. Reading will help you expand your vocabulary and give you new phrases and comparisons to pull from when trying to describe the new town that your players have arrived in, or the mountain paths that they're traversing. Not to mention, you can learn a lot about story structure, foreshadowing, and other narrative techniques from how an author lays out their book. Finally, even movies and TV shows can be a big help to your DMing. You can draw so much inspiration for the places and quests in your game from the movies and TV shows that you enjoy. Creativity is often sparked by the things we love, so the more movies you've watched and shows you've consumed, the more you'll find concepts and ideas you can add your own flavor to and then bring to your table. Don't make the mistake of thinking you can only learn from other D&D games. Sometimes the best teacher is whatever you're watching on Netflix these days. I'm a firm believer that you don't need to know every single rule to be a dungeon master. Knowing the different skills and being able to make rulings on the fly are much more important to the average session than having an encyclopedic memory of every nitty-gritty thing. But that being said, getting more acquainted with the rules of the game will only make you a better dungeon master, especially as they relate to combat. Sometimes it is kind of important to know the rules as written, like when a rogue needs to know if they get their sneak attack, or when the sorcerer is trying to figure out how many spells they can cast with their meta magic. Nobody knows everything, but the better you get with the rules, the less you'll have to crack open a book or do a quick Google search each session, which will help your combats run smoother and faster. It's also true that having to make up a ruling for everything will only get you so far. Eventually, it could feel unfair for your players if they aren't able to benefit from rules that would actually be in their favor, or if your rulings aren't consistent from session to session. It's one thing to forget a rule here or there or make a judgment call in the moment, but looking up the actual rule in between sessions will make you more familiar with the game's mechanics and keep your players from getting a raw deal when things don't always shake out their way. To summarize, nobody expects you to know every single rule, but as you play, you can make an effort to pick up a few new ones every session. It'll make your games a lot easier in the long run. Running a session can be fun, exciting, tense, and exhausting. Coming up with descriptions, judging scenarios, and reacting to your players' crazy schemes and ideas takes a lot of mental work. When y'all say bye and X out of Roll20, you might be done with D&D for the night. And that's totally fine. But one way to improve your DMing is to find time to analyze your own sessions in between games. This doesn't have to be anything too formal. You don't need to write an essay on every detail that occurred that evening. It's not a police report. But taking even just a few minutes to think of what you liked about the session and what you could have done differently will help you deal with those scenarios in the future. For example, you may have run a really fun and engaging combat that your players loved. So take a moment to figure out what aspects of the fight they really enjoyed, so you know what to include in the future. On the flip side, maybe an NPC you introduced fell flat, and your players weren't very interested in them. You can take a moment to think of why they didn't engage with them, and that can inform how you design NPCs in the future. I think analysis is especially important after sessions that didn't go as well as you hoped. Not every game can be your best, and sometimes I find myself disappointed with how things went or the way I performed as a DM. Instead of getting down on myself, I found that it helps to break down what exactly I didn't like about the session and how I could improve in the future. I also make it a point to come up with the things that went well too. Very rarely does a session go completely wrong, and finding the things I and my players enjoyed helps me keep things in perspective and remember that yes, I am a good dungeon master. You don't have to break down every single session, and the more you get under your belt, the less you'll need to analyze. But if you want to get better as a dungeon master, looking over your own games is one way to help. Anytime you run a session, you're really only getting one perspective on how things went down, your own. Sure, you can try to gauge how your players react to events at the table, and sometimes it'll be pretty obvious when everyone is having fun or not enjoying something as much. But it's good to see how the game is going through your players' eyes too. Asking for feedback from your party is the easiest way to see what they're enjoying and which areas you can improve. It can be tough to hear criticism, but they'll often pick up on things that you might not think of since they're the ones on the other side of the DM screen. While analyzing yourself is good too, sometimes it's hard to be honest with yourself, so outside opinions are always valuable. With that said, part of receiving constructive criticism is learning what to apply to your games and what to leave out. It may be that some of the feedback you get has less to do with your journey as a dungeon master and more about the player's own shortcomings. But being open to others' feedback is an essential part of getting better as a dungeon master. A final word of caution, don't feel like you have to elicit feedback all the time. It's good to get the temperature of the room every now and again, but getting too much feedback can cause you to start overthinking everything and trying to correct too much at a time. Instead, focus on actually integrating any comments that you get first. Then when you feel like you've seen improvement, you can see if there's anything else that they've noticed. You're only human, so take your time and don't get overwhelmed. None of these tips matter without this final one. Keep playing the game. Watching videos, reading articles, gathering feedback, developing your DMing style. All of these things only work if you're actually running sessions, whether with your friends around the table or online as folks you're just meeting. Getting behind the screen and practicing new skills or honing old ones is the best way to get better at being a dungeon master. Those are a few of the things that have helped me get better at running the game, but I still have plenty to learn myself. If you found other methods to help improve your dungeon master skills, I'd love to hear about them in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, leaving a like and subscribing to the Bards College are great ways to support the channel. I make videos about DMing, D&D, and everything in between, so if you like this one, there's more to come. But for now, good luck, and remember, crit your players.